Hello, everyone. Today is Wednesday, December 2nd. As always, I'm your host for Collectibles and Coffee, Edward Gwynn. My beverage of choice today is just water. Today, we mentioned in the past few episodes, we're getting towards the end of the year. Now is really the time to buy more than ever. I'm going to go over some of the things that have happened, what is the reasoning for this, why you should be buying now. If you're looking to get in, there is really no better opportunity to be buying really anything than right now. So we do have a fair amount to cover. Let's hop right in. I've mentioned it time and time again in this episode. It's a fairly common mantra that most people in the investing sector are familiar with. The quote, Warren Buffett, be greedy when others are fearful, be fearful when others are greedy. And fundamentally, the basic premise of this is he is encouraging you to go against herd mentality. And we've discussed in the past, we've had previous episodes where we've explained why herd mentality is a dangerous thing. You want to be avoiding herd mentality because as often as people like to think the majority opinion of going with the herd and doing what people know and the majority of the herd can't be wrong, oftentimes it is in your personal best interests to do not what the herd thinks, but what is best for you. And often, as we see in the case of the investing market, the investing sector, even when it scales down to collectibles, hobbies, you want to be going against what the herd is doing. And if we tie that back to Warren Buffett's quote, be greedy when others are fearful, that means that when people are fearful, people are uncertain about the future of the market. People are uncertain about the future of their stock, their assets, and they're thinking about maybe I should sell before it gets worse. Usually this means it's happening during a dip. People who had been experiencing rises, especially if you got into Pokemon, we've seen how it's really exploded in the past few months. If this is their first major boom cycle, and they've experienced, wow, if cards I bought back in August and September, they've done nothing but go up. I'm starting to get my PSA returns. But now, within the past week or 2 weeks or so, people are starting to slowly sell off their cards. There's more competition in the market. And people are starting to think, well, these prices, they're lower than they were in October. October was really when everything was really starting to accelerate. Everything looked like it was on the up and up. So a lot of people think back to those times and think, well, prices are down now. Maybe I need to start selling. This is an example of the market being fearful. This is an example of the market of people being fearful. And based on what Warren Buffett thinks, be greedy. This is the time for you to buy. The flip side of the quote, be fearful when others are greedy, would have been towards the beginning of this. If you were buying in October as opposed to buying the beginning back in August and September, you're probably paying some of the most premium prices during this whole time. Prices had really peaked around October, kind of in the middle of October to the end of October. If you were trying to buy in then, you were really buying into the hype and you were probably spending more money than you should have been. And tying that back to the quote, be fearful when others are greedy, that means anyone who was in the market at that time may have wanted to throw a little bit of caution to the wind and be aware that if everyone's trying to get in right now, everyone's spending more money than they should be, maybe it's a time to sell. Maybe you want to be getting out of it. Maybe you start downsizing. Maybe you start thinking about what holdings you have, what the potential for the future looks like. Is it really going to go up more? And that's when people should be fearful. That's kind of the opposite. Usually this is kind of deterministic of when a bubble starts to happen. We see some of the evidence of a bubble happening when prices are just rising very rapidly. That's when you want to be fearful. That's when you want to be careful because that means there is a huge surge of people trying to get into the market, of people who have vested interests that are now looking to maybe shift their position. This is when you want to be careful. And we've seen this in the past. We've seen this with, most commonly, the example we've used time and time again on the stream is the housing bubble in 2008 in the United States. This was really a dangerous time for a lot of people because people weren't taking heed of this. People weren't being fearful enough. People were being greedy. There were people who were going out, spending money and trying to buy houses, thinking they would be in a position to refinance their house and they're taking on more money and more debt than they could handle. And what happened was we saw a wave of foreclosures. People were forced to sell off their houses, often for less than they had purchased it for in the past few years. These are things you want to be careful of, because if you're on the wrong side of this, if you aren't able to identify when you should be fearful or when you should be greedy, it's really, really going to punish you. And this is why going with the herd mentality is not always going to be the best and most successful thing for you, because oftentimes if you're just going with the herd and you're just kind of rolling with the punches and taking it all in stride, it's not encouraging you to think for yourself, because at the end of the day, if you're looking to invest, if you're looking to park your money somewhere, if you're looking to come out ahead in this hobby, in this industry, you have to be looking out for yourself. And often the herd doesn't always have your best interest in mind. So you have to be looking for yourself. And oftentimes that means going against the flow and doing the opposite of what the herd wants you to do. Because if you're in a position to capitalize on the herd itself, that puts you in a far, far better position than trying to roll the herd and just be one of the sheep inside. So right now, I mentioned this, I think, on Monday in the Menagerie Monday stream. December is really the beginning of a short-term price dip. We're coming off of Black Friday. We're coming off of slow retail months, so people are going to be struggling for money in both directions. With the holidays, you see a lot of people who start selling off their things, mainly because if the COVID pandemic hasn't really caught up to them yet financially, usually the holidays does trigger people to alter their spending habits. This is something that big box stores really, really capitalize on. This is a big part of why Black Friday and Cyber Monday sales are so big. I believe projections had put Cyber Monday as one of the biggest sales day in history, simply in terms of the amount of people that are ordering online, people going out and spending money online on just everything on Cyber Monday. This is the type of thing that puts people in a very, very dangerous position, and as a result, we see a lot of people trying to sell off collections very quickly. A lot of times when people have bills due, people need to have money for the holidays, for gifts, for travel, whatever reason people may have. Usually people will sell off their collections first of collectibles, of Magic cards, Pokemon cards, anything they have, anything that they bought and they are able to turn over quickly because they're so liquid. They are usually the first thing to go. And if you look on social media, Facebook, Twitter in general, there's a lot of sales going on. You see a lot of people selling, and usually the first thing they'll say is, "I'm in a bind. I'm financially hurting, what have you. I need to make this amount of money very quickly." And usually, as mentioned, the first thing that goes, their Pokemon cards or Magic cards, they sell quickly. And they know that if someone buys them and they send the money to PayPal, they can cash out on it very quickly. I've spent a fair amount of time. I've been able to buy collections. I've been able to buy things just from people who, a lot of these people, they are in a position where they need money. They sometimes, if they're not getting bites, I'm sometimes able to come in and make an offer below what they're asking, and sometimes they take it. I've definitely found great deals doing so. And it may seem a little bit opportunistic, but that's the reality of this. If someone isn't buying, you either need to lower your price or accept a lower offer, or you need to accept that this isn't going to be something that sells very quickly. This is really across in all markets right now. The biggest one, Pokemon, it's really, really starting to flood. We can see this in the amount of cards are available for listing. If we look at the PWCC cycle this past month in November, I mentioned this in the past, I think there were over 1,200 listings for graded Pokemon cards that were being sold. I think this was one of their highest offerings ever in terms of how many cards people had submitted to be sold. I believe there was like a full PSA 10 first edition base set being broken out and sold individually. So there were a lot of cards that were being sold at this time. And this is a big indicator that people are slowly starting to get their cards back. And I shouldn't say slowly, they're starting to get their cards back. And now these people who are getting their cards back are starting to want to list them and get them sold as quickly as possible. And this is something we notice because a lot of people, there's a huge amount of graded cards available. I'm in multiple groups on Facebook, and I can see this all the time. People, and it's also very obvious if you know what to look for. A lot of these people are basically getting their collections, whether they went back and dug it up, things that they had as a little kid, for example. Now they're just trying to rediscover. They found a Charizard, they found some base set cards. If they went out and just got them graded, if they only had a few cards, for example, if you only your only big money cards are your base 3, maybe you're lucky enough to have a Charizard, Blastoise, Venusaur, you set those out to get graded, you paid the expedited amount to have it prioritized and grade quickly and get back to you quickly, and now you're just turning around and wanting to sell it. There's a fair amount of those people, and you can tell from our posts that they haven't been this very long. They obviously just found their cards and wanted to get the maximum return on them as possible. To them, it didn't really cost them much. These cards are cards that they've had sitting in a closet for 20 years or so, and this is a nice surprise. This is basically an end of 2020 bonus for them. They didn't really put any money into buying it more recently. If they had purchased it within the past 6 months or so, they're still getting a nice return on it. And then if they went out and graded it, then they're able to sell it. They're easily making their money back and more if it comes back in decent condition. And a lot of these are really starting to sell, and a lot of these people are probably more motivated to sell rather than the people who have been in this for a short period of time and are maybe trying to flip cards. That's not really something that could easily be done with grading. So the people who are wanting a quick windfall, sometimes you may be in a position to find good deals on them, especially if all they don't care about the cards themselves. And you can, again, if you talk to enough people, you deal with enough people, you start to get a pretty good sense of what these people want and what they're trying to do. And if you're covering their costs and then they're making some on top, I've definitely had some experiences where people don't care. Some people they don't care about Pokemon at all. They just looked at it as, hey, I heard Pokemon cards were getting expensive. I found some of my old cards. I sent off the big ones to get graded. This is a nice bonus for me at the end of the year. And they just want their cards out of their house. You make an offer. Sometimes you find a great buy. The interesting thing to know about PSA, and I wish I'd covered this a few days ago. I don't think it was, the news was finalized when it happened. But on Monday, Collectors Universe, which is the parent company of PSA and PCGS, Professional Coin Grading Services, they sold their company, and this was a pretty big deal in the collector's market. A fair amount of people know about this. The company sold at $700 million to Nat Turner, who is an angel investor. He's invested in a lot of different companies. He's bought and sold companies over the years. He's done very well. The most important thing to note is that he is a very avid sports collector. I dug around information. I've on Google, I looked around. I was able to find like a small blog of his. He kind of gives a preview of why of the things he's done, why he's been so successful in investing in various businesses and companies. There's actually a long list of companies that he has invested in. And at the bottom, it does say, as mentioned, he is a very avid sports collector. He likes vintage basketball cards. Apparently, he has a very extensive art collection as well. He has a lot of sealed product that are pretty old and expensive. There's several interesting things to note about there. One, it really goes to show that sports cards just completely overshadows your traditional collectibles that we think about, like Magic, Pokemon, etc., because of how ubiquitous and universal sports cards really are. For most people pick the sports that they like. I think in his case, he liked basketball cards, and he really is big into vintage basketball cards, among others. One, this does go back and tie to some of the things we mentioned in the past, that sports cards, it is a different market. It does require a different subset of knowledge. This is something that is pretty different than what most people in our category know about. I really don't know about sports cards much, to be honest. I have a pretty basic understanding. I know what to look for. I know what the big sets are. If I go to, for example, Walmart, Target, I know what to keep my eyes out for in sets that will be profitable. They'll sell quickly. But beyond that, I don't really know a lot of the older sets. I don't really know what sets have done well, what individual cards have done well, etc. That's a little bit outside my knowledge range. That's something I should be more aware of. But if you're one of those people that has the knowledge that you're into sports cards, this is something that is very good for you. And overall, not just necessarily for sports cards collectors, but I think for anyone who has a vested interest in graded cards overall. For those of you who have listened since the beginning, if you remember our interview with Charlie Herlocker, he is representative for Ludkins. They do a lot of grading via PSA. He mentioned that getting more people into the graded market is a good thing. This is really another good example of a rising tide raises all ships. Benefiting from this, if PSA benefits from this, if PSA is able to become a better company as a result of being owned by Nat Turner, and he's able to change direction of the company. Obviously, PSA is not without its share of issues. There's a lot of backlog on cards as people have really started to just flood PSA with their cards, and PSA, to my understanding, still has a backlog. We're looking at like 6 to 8 months from people who have already submitted their cards. If you were to send a bulk submission today, you are probably waiting close to a year at this point, I imagine, depending on how they change. I know that they have been trying to hire more people to help grading, but grading itself is, I imagine, a fairly labor-intensive process. It's also something that people have to be trained to do, to be able to look out for. It's not something where you can just hire someone and you just teach them, hey, here's a cash register, have at it, good luck. I imagine the training process itself is something that has a fairly high standard, and training is something that does take a fair amount of time in itself. So when you have people who are dedicated to training instead of grading, then you're probably exacerbating the issue short term as well. But as mentioned, shifting away from being publicly owned to privately owned is overall probably going to be a good thing. I think some issues, if you kind of delve a little bit deeper into the direction that this headed, the reason that I imagine that they sold CGC Collectors Universe sold their company was because that there was some pressure internally. I looked around, and I think a few months ago they said that Alta Fox Capital, which is a hedge fund, they disclosed that they own 5.4% of Collectors Universe, and they are basically looking for an overhaul in the board. They think some of this is paraphrasing. I read this from multiple different sources. You can go back and look a few months ago to where people had started to where articles were published about this. And in short, the gist that I kind of got was that the board, being slow to innovate, they don't really have they're not really in tune with the current times, as it were. And if you do a bit more research, the average age on the board is about 73 years old. So I think this hedge fund, Alta Fox Capital, they were a little bit uncomfortable with the direction of the company. They think that it probably should be a little bit more modern. We do have to remember PSA is a pretty old company. This is something that they've been doing for quite some time. If you go back and listen to my stream regarding graded cards, I do talk about the history of some of these companies. So you can go and take a look at that. If your average age on someone who is on the board is 73, a lot of these people are probably relatively set in their ways. This is something where, hey, this is the way we've done it. We've done this way for a long time. It should stay this way. But given how quickly the world has changed in 2020, everything, no matter who you are, you've been impacted in some way. Given how quickly the industry has changed, given how quickly the collectible market has changed, and given how much demand there is that they haven't seen before, their stock is sold at record highs. I believe at the time of settlement on Monday when this was sold, I believe the shares had sold at $75 and change. I think $75.25 was what it had mentioned. This is their high because at the beginning of the year, I think right when the pandemic had started, at the end of February, beginning of March, their stock was only hovering about low 20s or so. And we've seen it triple over the past few months with how quickly people have gone to market. And this is something that a lot of people have taken notice of. If you follow from the past few months, Dumb Money, the guys who bought the $375,000 base set first edition booster box, this was something that was that they had taken notice. They had invested in Collectors Universe as well. So the fact that it's been as successful as it has this year, and now they're looking to change and capitalize on that success, sell it to Nat Turner, and look towards him to change and modernize the company, create new innovations inside the company. I think this is a really promising time. I think people who are holding on to PSA cards, who are looking at graded cards in general, same with PCGS, numismatics, professional coin grading services for people who are getting their coins graded. That's something I've been looking more into that market as well. It is a very, very interesting market to me. It is something that, again, I'm not super familiar with at this point, but I think if there's money to be made there, if there's opportunity to diversify your portfolio, to be investing in something, there's no reason to not do a small round of research and see where it takes you. Maybe there's something that piques your eye. I've definitely been talking to my fair share of coin collectors as of late, and it is really a market that is very, very interesting. It is a very, very open market, and it is definitely one of those markets that really outclasses the collectible market we're used to. Pokemon, Magic. Sure, there are big expensive cards. There's flashy cards. The PSA 10 first edition Charizard that sold from collection. The closing auction was for $295,000. I believe that actually surpasses the amount that Logic's Charizard has sold for. I think that was about $220,000. So there's a lot of, I think this is a really good time to be excited. I think if you're one of those people who are holding on to graded cards, or you're looking to get in graded cards, coins, this is a really exciting time. I think that with someone that has as much enthusiasm and know-how as Nat Turner, I think potentially PSA, PCGS, I think they're going to see an overhaul in the near future as Nat Turner really changes the direction of the company. If that's something that the board wants, if they're looking to shift in that direction and modernize it, I think that shows a lot of promise. I think it's a really exciting time, as mentioned, to get in, to really get ahead of the curve. And I think the people out there who haven't really gone into grading cards before, this may be an opportunity to look a little bit more into it. It's unclear how quickly a lot of these changes are going to take into effect. As we mentioned, there's a pretty severe backlog for PSA right now, for grading cards, just grading everything. Sports memorabilia, Pokemon, all these have really created this massive backlog at PSA. So one can hope that the best thing that Nat Turner can do is change things around, as mentioned, trying to modernize it and hopefully eliminate some of this backlog. That's probably one of the biggest negative issues that people do have with PSA, is simply how long it takes to turn things around. So with that, the last thing I do want to note, and this really does tie back into the beginning of what we had talked about, the fundamental mantra, be greedy when others are fearful, be fearful when others are greedy. It is something that I'll repeat again and again, not just in this stream, but other episodes as well. There seems to be a lot of uncertainty in terms of where people stand regarding the market right now. I've seen this in a lot of groups. Because I do buy and sell a lot of different things, I see this. People are concerned in the sneaker market. People are concerned in Pokemon. People are concerned in Magic. Really just everything across the board. There's a lot of concern, and I think people, to be fair, I think there is a legitimate concern for this, because people are looking at a lot of their collectibles, anything they've bought in the past few months, and prices are slowly starting to stabilize, maybe slide a little bit. And now they're concerned that, well, maybe it's sliding down, maybe it's not so bad, but if this starts turning into an avalanche and prices start cratering, people are obviously trying to look ahead and get ahead of that, because if things are going to start cratering and it does turn from a small slide into a huge landslide, maybe people want to be jumping off as quickly as possible. In my mind, take this, interpret this how you will. You have to make your own decision. You have to do your research for yourself. I think this is a perfect example of, you want to be greedy when others are fearful. There is a lot of uncertainty. People don't really know about what the future of the market looks like. This is a time for you to be buying. A lot of the cards have come down off their highs. I think being aware of how high some of these cards can go does mean that there is a market out there. It does mean that there are people who are looking to spend big money, who can afford to do so and spend a lot of dollars on big high-end collectible, on iconic cards, and those things will always have value. I think where a lot of people are getting uncertain is for those of us who can't afford the first edition PSA 10 Charizard for $295,000, for example, what does it do for the rest of our collections? For people who have maybe only been collecting in the past few years, or people who threw some money at this at the beginning, maybe back in August, September when things were starting to heat up, and this is their first boom cycle, what does that look like? Well, the important thing to remember is that the longer you are in a market, the longer you are in an industry, you will experience these ebbs and flows, these boom bust cycles. Things can't be booming forever, because if it did, that's a bubble. That's not something we want, because that doesn't make for a healthy market long term. For those of you who have done Pokemon for quite some time, you'll remember we went through something very similar to this, albeit not quite this extreme, back in 2016. A few days ago, I was looking on Facebook, and I remember seeing some of my thread. People were looking at prices. People noticed that there was a huge demand and a price surge on cards in July 2016. You think back, and people were asking, oh, what caused this price? Why did it basically flatline and then just have this massive spike? If you think back, July 2016, that was when Pokemon Go was introduced to the market. It's crazy to think it's been 4 years now since that happened. But that was really the beginning of this, and people who had bought in 2014, 2015, they were already seeing those prices, and that was a big boom. Prices went up. People were trying to buy things up like crazy. Back then, things were a fraction of the price they are now, but we saw the same thing. It wasn't sustainable. People liked Pokemon Go. There are people that liked Pokemon Go for a few months. Maybe it lasted the rest of quarter 3, the rest of quarter 4. By the time 2017 rolled around, Pokemon Go started to become an afterthought for people. That's not to say people don't play Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go has actually exploded during the pandemic due to people being locked down, people not being able to go out and do activities. So a lot of people just started playing Pokemon Go and taking walks, taking runs, and just playing as they go. Pokemon Go has done very well over all this time. Even if you are not involved with Pokemon Go yourself, you can't deny that there is a lot of interest out there. And there's a lot of people who still have fun, who still enjoy playing it. But that was really the beginning of the first boom cycle, July 2016. And since then, it's cooled off. But you have to remember, even during the cool-off period, even in end of 2016, 2017, prices that settled after the boom were still higher than prices pre-Pokemon Go, pre-July 2016. The prices were still higher. And this, I think, is what we're ultimately going to see. If we wait a little bit, maybe prices are slowly starting to come down. We combine this with it being December. People are motivated to sell. People are wanting to cash out and maybe get things for the holiday. People who may be scared. People don't want to be holding on to this long term. Maybe if they were just here for a short-term flip, maybe they just want to cash out. As we mentioned earlier in the episode, people need money. There's a multitude of reasons. If you want to be buying, you should be buying now. I think this is, again, a really good time to get in because you can capitalize on all these things. There's a multitude of reasons why people are wanting to get out of the market. But as we saw in 2016, if you were involved in the market before the boom and you bought in when prices were low, you were still rewarded after the boom, after prices had cooled off. Even if you didn't sell at the peak, you still did well after the cooling off period in 2017. I think we are experiencing the same thing right now. I think we saw, if you had bought in at the beginning of the year, all the way up through August, September, you definitely did great. If you bought in during the boom, you probably spent a little bit more than you should have. Prices are coming down. If you want to sell, I would recommend that you hold rather than sell. The amount of cards I've been purchasing, a fair amount of cards, I'm either setting off to get graded, I'm putting them in a safe, I'm just holding on to them. I see no reason to sell right now because demand isn't really there for a lot of these higher end collectible cards. Some of these that people are just these kind of middle tier cards that people graded are trying to sell off quickly as possible. I'm buying those up. I'm holding on to them because if projections are right, if Pokemon is going to do something big for their 25th anniversary that's coming up right now in 2021, we already have a big set in English lined up. We know about that. On Monday, I talked about how big Shiny Star V was, the booster product that dropped. These are all big things, and I think if you are able to buy during this dip, during this brief low, and we do see another boom cycle come in 2021 with the 25th anniversary, if it starts to bring people back in, we start getting investors back in, life starts to return to normal. We've seen how the COVID vaccine is starting to show a lot of promise. I believe first shipments of the COVID vaccine are potentially being shipped out very soon. If life is able to slowly return to normal in 2021 and people get back on their feet, the economy starts to turn up, all these things, you want to be buying. You want to be buying right now. You want to be holding. And in that boom cycle, if things take off again, then that's when we're cooking with fire. That is when we are pedal to the metal. The market's doing great. The economy's doing great. People have more money to spend on their cards, on their hobbies. People who maybe just picked up this year are already getting rewarded 1 year later. These are all things that if you're looking to get ahead of the curve, if you want to be ready for 2021, you want to be hitting the ground running right now. I'm not saying make reckless purchases. I'm not saying you should be spending every penny you have. You should still be prioritizing yourself first. You need to be saving in the event that things get worse. That is a possibility. I think short term, we will see the pandemic get a little bit worse than it is right now before it starts to get better. But when things do start to turn up, when things do get better, when things are starting to look like things are going to start returning to normal, you want to be there. You want to be there at the beginning. You want to be there with cards that you are able to sell because you had good returns on them. That's when you want to be buying and you want to get ahead of the curve. And I think this is going to reward people. I think that people, as mentioned, in all industries, not just Magic, not just Pokemon, sneakers, toys, what have you, name your collectible. This is the time to get in. A lot of markets that are stable will continue to be stable. If you're looking to make big returns, buy now while markets are low. I know a lot of people had one of the pretty interesting discussion I saw in one of the sneaker groups was people were thinking that are sneakers really starting to die off? Are we past the age where sneakers aren't as collectible as they are? And one of the most common responses I saw, and I think something that people aren't understanding, is yeah, of course sneakers are probably low right now. If most people are working from home, if most people are cooped up inside their house for a week without leaving their house, why would people need to be motivated to buy sneakers to go out and show off and be comfortable in? I don't wear shoes around the house. I'm barefooted right now. I wear my shoes maybe once a week because that's how often I leave the house. If that, sometimes it goes 2 weeks without me needing to leave the house at all. There's a reason why the sneaker market is down, but what happens when people want to go back outside? Life returns to normal. People can continue with their daily business. We're no longer on lockdown. People no longer need to work from home as much or in the capacity that they do right now. People are going to need shoes again. There's a reason why you should be buying shoes now when people don't need them versus in 2021 when people want to go out and people are going to be wanting to spend several $100s on a nice pair of sneakers. Same idea with Magic, same idea with Pokemon, same idea with any collectible market. People are scared. People want to sell. This is the time for you to buy. Take Warren Buffett's advice to heart. Obviously, he is far more successful than probably any of us will ever be. He's done very well with investing in the past. Take heart of what he has said. Be greedy when others are fearful. Be fearful when others are greedy. A lot of people right now, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of uncertainty. This is the perfect time as an investor to be buying and to be buying in, to be capitalizing on this opportunity. And as a lot of advice I try to give on this stream, you don't need a lot of money to do this. As mentioned, most of us probably can't afford $295,000 on a PSA 10 first edition Charizard. You don't have to spend $295,000 to get ahead of the curve. You can go out and buy. You can buy 7s, 8s, 9s, unlimited Charizards under $1,000. That feels pretty affordable to me. You can buy a lot of these mid-tier cards. They don't have to be first edition with a high grade. You can buy, if you're okay with a 7, 8, or a 9, you can definitely find good deals on those, because that's where a majority of the cards fall. There's a lot of them out there right now. If you're able to be in a position where you can buy them up, sit on them, I think you'll be rewarded. And I think there really isn't a better time than December to buy. But it is important to know, this is probably the last thing I'll say on this, is you don't have to feel obligated to buy at every opportunity you see. There will always be more opportunities. If you offer to someone, if someone has something for sale for $1,000 and it sounds like they may be in a position where they want to sell, I would probably start out offering $750, for example, $800, depending on what it is. Obviously, you obviously want to, there's some tact in this. You don't want to place an insultingly low offer. Maybe do some research, look on eBay, say, well, if you look at this auction, this sold for $1,000, but after eBay and fees and shipping, you're getting about $850 to $820. What if I offer $800? What if I offer $750? Maybe the guy doesn't want to go through all that hassle. He'll take it right then and there. If he says no, okay, be ready to walk away. Don't think, well, this is a deal I should pay $1,000 on. Just be ready to walk away. Look for a different deal. Look for a different opportunity. There are countless opportunities out there. There are more deals that I just have to pass on because I think I can find a better deal elsewhere. You have to be okay with that. But regardless, I think buying now is going to put you ahead of the curve going into 2021. This is probably going to carry on for the next 2 weeks or so as people continue to try and sell their things to make those last minute holiday purchases. If they need to travel, if they have any unforeseen expenditures come up, use this opportunity to buy. And as always, be greedy when others are fearful. We are heavily into the fearful camp. This is time for you to be greedy. This is time for you to start buying. With that, that'll be a wrap on today's episode. As always, thank you for listening. If you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Edwin13. You can find the social media sites for Vermilion on the right. As always, wherever in the world, stay safe and be careful out there. We'll be back tomorrow with more. Thanks again for listening.